Ooh, yes, it's part 4 of the Gunter Wulff Bingolett. So, what have you been doing, Ralph? Well, I'll show you.
Welcome to Ralph's house!
You've just caught me in the evening working on the coin mechanism again. I'll tell you for why, because you see this wire here. Actually, that should sit centre of that hole. What I'll probably do is put a washer on the end of that and a kind of little grub screw thing to retain it so it can't slide that way. Incidentally, this wire, I've just measured it on the vernier gauge, it's 2mm. There are 2 wires on this machine. There's this one, not exactly sure what it does, unless it's a weight thing and it helps divert it into the reject. I don't know, but I suppose the answer is to put different types of coins through and see what happens. And there's the other one that I mentioned that sits on top of the coin tube. I incorrectly said that it sits in the middle of that hole. It doesn't. It just sits, see where that shadow is on that line, it just sits in there. And all that does is when the coin hopper is completely full of coins, this wire will then push against that back panel and the coin will just sort of sit there. And I guess, not having tried it, that while the coin hopper is completely full and it can't take any more, there's a coin that sits there, can't drop into the coin tube. Anything that drops on top of it hits that and goes out through the overflow chute. That's my guess, but again, you know, until I put it in the machine, don't really know. It's interesting actually reading, I think on the Penny Machines forum and a couple of other well, I'll say one other place, people talking about restoring these and trying to work out what's missing. I hope this video becomes useful in terms of how this whole thing works. And I think what we'll do, the next job is we'll screw up this coin mechanism. I've got a broken bracket there which holds the coin chute, you know, when you put your money in. That's not a problem. I can make a new bracket there. I should just, you can drill through this stuff. You go very carefully with a fine drill bit, and I'll make a new bracket and put a couple of screws in it. I may even tap the metal, don't know. Yeah, so this is part 4, and I've also been working on the front. And if you remember in episode 3, I was using polyurethane tubing for the pins. The reason I've used that, and I can only thank others that have worked on Bingoletts for that if you use silicone tubing you don't get the right bounce. So I thought, I'll take notice of that and use polyurethane tubing. But on the front I could in fact use silicone, and I had some years ago I had a smart car. Gosh, I miss that thing. I drive a Honda Civic Mark 8 these days, which, you know, for a guy in his 60s, that's a nice car to drive. It is really. It's like sitting in a cosy armchair. But I miss the smart car for getting around the city. Very quick. Ran virtually on fresh air and just a joy to drive. But it uses lots of hoses in the engine bay, which seem to melt or deteriorate. So I switched over to silicone, and at the time I bought several lengths in different colours. You know, I was being fanciful, and I didn't use all of it, but then I just remembered I'd got it still, you know, and it's got a 2mm bore, no, 3mm bore I think, which was ideal for the front. And you can see what I've started to do here, because of course this all had that awful rubber on it. So I've changed that, and I've also replaced a couple of springs. I've got more springs to come. I didn't have any in the right length for that. I'm still cleaning the track pins Some of the washers behind are a bit rusty, so I've unbolted those, replaced them with new washers, new nuts on the back. It's lucky this thing's metric. That's a good thing about working on German machines. You know, you're not working in imperial stuff. Everything's metric. It's nice and easy. Yeah, so I'll resolve that. I'll have a look in my box of... I'll tell you what, if I was married, which I'm not, my wife would be going mad with all the boxes of bits of this and bits of that. But, you know, if you've got a hobby like this, you need stuff like that. I suppose I would get relegated to the shed, and any hobby I'd got would be right out in the winter. I'd have to sit there next to somebody watching Coronation Street, probably. Perish the thought. I don't have any of that. Right, so, and the other thing, if you remember back in episode 2, I pointed out this coil that is attached to the motor on the top carriage assembly, and there's a wire broken on there. I think a mouse has chewed at it. I could rewind the coil if it came to it, but I think it's actually sound. There it is, that gold coloured one on the right. Now if you flip the whole chassis forward on the hinges, 4 bolts hold it on the back. There's 4 nuts that you need to undo. Ignore those screws, those cheesehead screws, don't undo those. And once you've undone the 4 nuts and washers, the motor will slide away. And here we've got it on the bench. And I think what we'll do, I'm fairly sure that's a mouse that's chewed that. It looks it, doesn't it? But look, it also rotates, which isn't good. So what I'm thinking is, well, first of all, we'll get in with a craft knife, because we can reinstate all this stuff. Pull this off, and then we'll put this under the microscope. I'll have a look at both ends and make sure the same hasn't happened on the other end. And the main thing is we need to get a really good connection onto this wire here, a mechanical connection, not just strap that wire across and add solder. That's not sufficient. Bear in mind, you know, there's 240 volts going through this, so we need to make sure we've got a good connection there. So let's have a look at this under the microscope. There we are. We're looking at it on the Andostar. I'm trying to keep my camera still. It's not easy when I'm working on the bench at the same time, but you can see that wire. You can see where it's come off. Yeah, I think I'm going to gently cut that away with a craft knife, and then we'll flip it over and have a look at the connection underneath. I suspect that's where it is. Let's have a look. Yeah, not the easiest thing to see, but I tell you what, I'm glad I got this. At least I can work close up then. Yeah, we definitely need a good mechanical connection there, so, and we'll need to seal it as well and make sure this doesn't move. I'm fairly sure that this coil, let's get in a bit closer. I think that's all right actually. There's no signs that it's got hot or anything. I think it's just simply that connection. So yeah, we'll pull off the sleeving on the outside of this and see what's what. See if we can get a decent connection on it. Yeah, I think I've got it. Managed to loop it around anyway. There isn't quite enough wire to run it around several times, but I think I've got a good connection there. That'll do fine. So what I'll do now is I'm going to run some insulation tape round, but this stuff that was on it originally sticks the insulation tape quite well, so I'm sticking it to one the sticky side, and I've just slid the insulation tape through from underneath. It's coming through from underneath, so I'll gradually pull that round, and then I shall unpeel that, and then we'll just stick it down and seal the whole thing. I think I'll need to put a little bit of tape under that join as well. But otherwise, yeah, I think that's solved that. That was the original label that went round the coil, 6100 0.14. I reckon that's 6,100 turns, and that's the gauge of the wire, I'm guessing. So for reference, I've written it on in marker pen. So if I did have to wind it, I'm going to need an accurate counter, aren't I? 6,100 turns. So you need to have your wits about you with that. But that's the gauge of the wire used. Well, that's useful. If it ever does burn out, at least we know. So I say I put it in permanent marker on the side because, you know, bar sticking it on with sellotape. Well, I might do that. A bit under sellotape deteriorates though, doesn't it, after a period of time? I think that'll do. Marker will do fine. So that's the coil sorted, and it's all taped up. Yep, looks alright. One wire goes to this side and joins up with that broken wire, right? The other one goes into the centre of the coil, which makes sense. Well, hopefully that motor will work now. That would be the next job, is, I suppose, is taking the motor apart and re-greasing it. Doesn't look like the easiest thing to get into though, does it? I presume you've got to drill the pot rivets out. I don't know. Do I need to? Possibly not. Yeah, looks like those rivets go right through. So even if you undid those screws, you're not going to get it apart. Well, what I'll do is I'm going to give this motor, just give it a clean round, and we'll bolt this back in the machine. Once I've got the micro switch attached to the coin slot, we'll see if it actually works. I remember reading about a guy who had trouble with his running very slowly in low temperatures and that sort of stuff, but you know, who knows what the motor had been through in its lifetime. It may be fine. 220 volts, 50 hertz. I guess that's going to be the year 59. So that's when this machine was made. And that's the motor. I did look online and I cannot find this motor anywhere. It doesn't exist. Not now. So I don't know. Maybe, yeah, again, there's the date. 59. Alright, well, we'll put that back in the machine. Exact reversal of taking it out. The other thing I've noticed, looking at the front, and I've had to remove the pin assembly, is that the sleeves around the pins that finish off these holes, they're actually brass. Let me see. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. I've polished 5 of them. Vast difference. Okay, they're going to tarnish again in time, but not for a long while. These probably haven't been cleaned since the machine was built. So, yeah, a bit of a tedious job. I'm having to do that one now as well. But I think well worth it. Should be once the pins are back in it. You remember in the last episode I said that this hinges out. It does indeed, but like an Orwin, if anybody's ever worked on one of those, if you try and hinge the front door out when it's just standing on a worktop, it'll fall forward because it's got a lot of weight in it. And the same would apply here, but you have got a little bit of leeway. But obviously, you know, if you're going to swing this right out, you need to support it in some way. Anyway, this is the cam assembly with the motor now refitted, the wires all soldered. Now, there are lots of leaf switches in this machine, and it's worth noting that you're not going to be able to buy these. The only way you can do it is to either buy steel strip, which you can get that, but then of course you're going to have to drill for the bolt holes or screw holes, and also where there's a contact that poses its own problems. I don't know quite that. I imagine they're spot welded on. It's either that or you use second-hand ones out of old pinball machines, and it does present lots of problems. But if you look at this cam assembly, and it is a cam because it's got high points and low points, depending on what, well, depending when you rotate it. And these contacts then lift up, they ride over these, you see. But if you look here, see that one? It's worn right down the centre of it. And there's a couple of them like that. I think they've moved them to sort of compensate a bit. And also they've readjusted the gap so it works. And I have been down it and I've turned this cam right round several times, and they do lift as they should. But I'm going to need to keep my eye on these. And at some point in the future, one or two I'm going to have to replace, I should think. And I'll have to be a little bit creative on that, I think. Otherwise, we're getting very close now to complete reassembly. The coin mechanism is all done now with the new coin tube. Sorry, my automatic light keeps going out in here. It'll come back on eventually. Oh, and also these arrived in the post. I'm thinking, what are those, Ralph? Any guesses? I'll tell you what they are. They are colour sensors, and these 4 LEDs light up whatever colour is in front of they're for an Arduino, and they recognise colours. And the reason I wanted these, they were pretty cheap, to be honest. I think it was something like £4 for the lot. I got in mind of anybody that's worked on arcade machines, early ones, is aware of the horse racing ones. Some of them, the horses were literally blown down the track from underneath, and whichever colour comes in gets a payout. And I thought, well, let's scale that down a bit. How about a coloured marble race? So you've got a long track upon which all the marbles ride. They go through. They've got various obstacles, so at any point, any single one of them can be leader. But I needed a way at the end of the machine being able to recognise which colours come in first or second. Maybe just first may be sufficient, but I've got a stack of 6 of these for the price they were, and each one of these will feed back the recognised colour. So I kind of imagine putting these or in front of the track or to the side of the track at the finish line, and it will then pick out which colour, and if yours comes in first, it'll pay out. I thought that could be quite a bit of fun for very small kids, because I'm quite happy to take these to school fetes, that sort of thing. You know, it'd be an interest for the kids, wouldn't it? I'm not going to charge anything for me time or anything, and any money they put through the machines can go into school funds, can't it? It'd be a good thing to do. And also the company that I work with, they constantly throughout the year raise money for Great Ormond Street, and at least 2 of my machines I envisage having at my employers' offices, so as people come in and out they can use them, and the money from that goes to Great Ormond Street. I just have to be very careful that whatever machine I use isn't perceived as a gambling machine. So pinball would be okay, you get a length of time. There's probably another machine I could use that would be okay. But yeah, that's why I got these. Well, you haven't shown us much Raoul's house, have you? Well, no. I will do over the coming weeks, because the gains machines will cease very shortly because I've got other things to do, and also my workload during the day is getting larger. But I just thought I'd show you this. I had these red carpet treads on here. They weren't great. They soon wore through. So I bought a stair runner because I like the gaps each side. Now I had to centre it a bit to this way because I've still got this stair lift, which I'm going to keep incidentally. But I like this because I can hoover the carpet, no problem. If I get any dust on there, it's just a damp cloth, just wipe it down, it's all clean. And the whole stair runner from top to bottom came to 60 quid. I thought that was pretty good. And the stair runners I bought on Facebook Marketplace, they're notoriously expensive, but I've got enough to do 2 flights of stairs for 30 quid. So I thought I did pretty well with that. Ignore that extruded aluminium down there, but pick that up for another project. That was in my stepfather's garage. I wasn't going to leave that behind. Aluminium's expensive, you know. Yeah, so that's what I've been doing on Raoul's house, and we will be returning to the interior because we need to be cracking back on with that. My son and I need to get the workshop finished, the art project workshop that we're building in the back room, and I've got a couple of lift doors, believe it or not, which will make excellent worktops because they're stainless steel, you see. So if you want to mix paint on it or anything like that, it's going to be really easy to clean. Yeah, so that's what we've been doing in Raoul's house. More on that to come. Incidentally, before anybody asks, you've probably noticed these hairline cracks in the surface. Now, I'm not going to worry about those because in actual fact the artwork covers all of these, and the only bits that are exposed don't have any cracks in them. But this machine was made in 1959, so what do you think this stuff is? Go on, have a guess. Yeah, it's Formica, and I could actually replace the front if I wanted to go that far. I'm not going to, but I could. 2 ways of doing it. one, look around for a 1950s table of a similar colour, as long as the surface is alright, and then just literally cut it off the table. Or you can still, unbelievably, buy Formica. It's still made today. They first started making it in 1913. But yeah, that's what it is. It's Formica. There you go. The motor works. So my soldering job fixed that. When I started this in episode 1, I kind of anticipated it would run over 4 episodes. And I'm not far wrong. But what I'm going to do is I'm going to finish assembling everything now. All the motors work, all the contacts seem to work. No reason why it shouldn't work in theory. But I'm going to save that to episode 5. And the only thing that will be missing will be the artwork. I'll put in some temporary artwork, and then I'll show the whole thing running. A couple of jobs I've got to do. One is make a cash box for the back. That's for the overflow slope. It's got to drop into something. And the very back panel is missing. Although the surround's there, the back panel isn't, which is typical of when people have removed these things in a hurry. Couldn't get into the locks because presumably they'd lost the keys, so wrenched off the wall. That's generally what happens to these. So we're going to wait till episode 5, and then I'll take you through the whole thing, and shall put a temporary ball in it so we can see how everything works and all the scoring lights light up. So watch out for episode 5. Thank you for watching, and if you've got a Bingolett, a Tivoli or a Rialto, this is definitely the series of videos that you'll need to watch, because by the end of it I should be an expert on how everything works and what it does. Oh, and don't forget to subscribe.